Silberberg versus Sudbury Board of Education of 1988 was a landmark case where the Lord's Prayer was banned from all opening exercises in all Ontario public schools. So in the 1980s, under the Education Acts, all public schools were required to include the Lord's Prayer in opening exercises. Also, in the 1980s, under the Education Act, students were not required to participate in religious instruction and exercises if they did not want to and their parents did not want them to. So, students who didn't want to participate in the Lord's Prayer were allowed to exempt themselves and sit in the hallway while this occurred. Parents of students who were of other beliefs came together to sue the school board. They argued that this violates Section 2 of the Charter of Rights, where individuals have the freedom to conscience and religion. Because although students have the choice to opt out, since majority of the students are participating in the prayer, students that want to opt out may feel compelled to participate because they feel pressured and face stigmatization from their peers. So they won this case, and now, present day, under the Education Act, the Lord's Prayer is not required at all in opening exercises in any Ontario public school.
The Kandaharian vs. York Catholic District School Board was a recent trial in which a student challenged the validity of a board policy based on religious rights. In 2022, grade 10 student Daria Kandaharian sought out the position of student trustee. After being selected and supported by the administration to represent her school at the board level, her application was denied because she was not baptized Roman Catholic. This was an internal policy required from the board in order to uphold Catholic values within the Catholic school system. Daria took this case to trial to fight for the religious rights of non-Catholic students attending Catholic schools. The court ruled in favor of Daria on the basis that the board's policy violated Section 15 of the Charter of Rights of Freedom, Section 93 of the Constitution, and ruled it was non-consistent with the Education Act. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom states that every individual has the right to equal benefits without discrimination based on religion. The board's policy excluded nearly 5,000 students of the York Catholic District School Board who were part of other religious groups and attended these Catholic schools. The Catholic Board held on a Section 93(1) of the Constitution, which protects Roman Catholics to a separate school system, which is part of Canada's history. This right extended to hiring Catholic teachers. However, students are not teachers, and it was ruled that having non-Catholic student trustees would not jeopardize the Catholicness of the board. Furthermore, in the Education Act, the requirements for student trustee are listed below, which were not consistent with the board's internal policy, including the requirement that student trustees must be Roman Catholic. On October 6, 2022, the court released a landmark decision removing the religious requirement for the student trustee position within the York Catholic District School Board.
After listening to my colleagues, Ms. Jiffry and Ms. Hannah, I think there's a clear through line between these two situations. In terms of purpose, both cases are landmark decisions that influence religious freedom in our school systems that push for tolerance, diversity, and inclusion. We thought it was especially important to choose two cases that spanned a large time gap, starting in 1988 and ending in 2022, to make it clear that religion's place in education is still a complex, ongoing conversation with many uncomfortable truths and barriers. Most importantly, both these cases represent a governing body being forced to recognize their tendencies to stick to outdated traditions and regulations, a cliche that will continue to plague them if we carry biases, so pretty much forever. There are a couple aspects I want to point out for each case. Case 1 is meant for perspective. This is a foundational decision by the court that put the Charter of Rights and Freedoms over the more specific guidelines in the Education Act, and really a classic example of students being recognized as unique humans by the law as opposed to pawns in a system. Case 2 represents a much more interesting case to me in the Catholic Board. Although equity is the ministry's primary goal right now, the Catholic Board, as it stands, literally being an educational system built for a specific faith, has a ton of small hurdles to overcome. The Kandaharian case represents an important step for Catholic education, squashing a discriminatory policy that was past overdue for a rewrite. More importantly, in Catholic boards which choose to accept non-Catholic students, it represents action behind seemingly hollow calls for equity. When Catholic boards are instating equity initiatives all across the province, how are we supposed to take these seriously if student trustees, the literal voice for the students, aren't representative of a diverse student population? With the Kandaharian ruling, the York Catholic School Board was forced to adopt a meaningful position for structural representation, which will only enrich the student experience, and it literally just happened last year. In terms of significance for teachers, especially new teachers coming out of a bachelor's program, I think it's easy to read the Education Act's call for religious freedom and brush it off as an obvious expectation, but these cases serve as a reminder that the reality of Ontario's education system isn't always going to align with our humanitarian ideals, and religious freedom isn't necessarily going to reach a finite utopian conclusion. That's why it's important to continue to spread awareness and have meaningful discussions in the classroom with our students. And remember, what's obvious to us isn't obvious to everyone.